Friday, as I've said, is kind of a big day. And it gets downplayed. It gets kind of the short shrift. It gets kind of the short end of the stick. I hope that we will have quite a few more people here on Easter Sunday than we have on Good Friday. It always is that way. Good Friday service is kind of, whatever. I guess maybe I get around to it. And not just our church, just around the world and stuff. Good Friday services are usually much poor attended. Even the church I grew up in, which was not a very gospel-believing church and stuff, but people were very religious about attending worship. And Easter would have full house, and Good Friday would be about what we have right here. So it would be kind of the same deal. But as I was mentioning at the beginning, that what happened on that hill 2,000 years ago really is the center point of all of history. It's the culmination of everything in the entire Old Testament. It's the culmination of everything that God was doing from the very first words of "Let there be light" to the closing of the Old Testament canon, to the dawning of a new era with John the Baptist coming on the scene saying, "Repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand." Everything was pointing to and leading to and culminating in the cross. It was all about the cross. Everything was going to this. And not just everything leading before that, leading up to that, but everything that has happened since then. The entire New Testament is all reflections on and explanations of how this event, this cross, changed everything. That's what the entire New Testament is about. And everything that we do as a church, everything that's happened in churches for 2,000 years is all about talking about this cross. Not this specific one for the children, not this specific one, but for the cross and what it meant for us. That's what it's all about. And that's why I want to say it's a shame that Good Friday kind of gets lost in the shuffle of Christmas and Easter and all this stuff, Palm Sunday and all this other things that we celebrate. Good Friday is the pivotal moment. Everything exists. The entire Bible exists because of Good Friday. And I'm often asked, or I see the question asked, the question was asked on last night or yesterday afternoon, even in Good News Club, why is Good Friday good? Why do we call it Good Friday? Because it seems like a silly thing to say, Good Friday. Especially, like I mentioned, the church I grew up in was a church of, a little bit more somber. Even the everyday Sunday was rather somber. It was very formal. It was very somber. And then you brought Good Friday into the mix, and it was all black and dark and silent and somber. It was like a funeral. And kind of rightly so. Good Friday is this great thing. And so it was always, especially growing up, why is it Good Friday when it's like a funeral? Why is Good Friday good? Well, the simple answer is it's good because of what Jesus did there. But it wasn't immediately noticeable what Jesus did that day. But there was one man for whom Good Friday, not just Good Friday in general, but Good Friday, that actual day, was a very good Friday. Which begs us the question, who did Jesus die for? Because there's one sense, and we say Jesus died for everyone, but there's also another sense, and we're going to look at that here, that Jesus died for one man that day. Jesus died for one man, a man who, unlike the crowds that would left Jerusalem, he left Jerusalem that day, I can only imagine, leaping for joy and whooping and hollering and probably giving everybody he saw a high five. I don't know if they did high fives back then, but he was giving a high five. Every single person he saw on the way out of Jerusalem, he was giving them a high five and a hug, and he was whooping and hollering, and he was celebrating. He was ecstatic because there was one man for whom Good Friday was the best day of his life. And we don't learn a lot about him. We don't know a lot about him, but interestingly enough, he shows up in all four of the Gospels. And it's from all four of those Gospels. He shows up in Matthew 27 and Mark 15, Luke 23, John 18, and even into 19. He shows up. Matthew tells us that he's notorious. He's a notorious man. Mark tells us that he is among the rebels and that he has committed murder. Luke tells us that he is a wanted man for insurrection and for murder. Now, I think any other year prior to this year, I would have to define for you what insurrection meant. But I think that this year's events have kind of gone over what insurrection means. And so that is who this man is. He is wanted for insurrection and murder. That is why he is in prison. John adds that he is not just a notorious rebel who is in prison for murder and for insurrection, but he is a robber as well. He's a thief. And so that's who this man is. A notorious rebel, murderer, insurrectionist, thief. And that man's name is Barabbas. Barabbas was the man who, in a very, very real way, that Good Friday that was notorious for so many, that Good Friday was truly the best day ever. Because it was for Barabbas that cross was waiting. Jesus was just arrested the night before, but they already had a cross ready to go. They already had the whole setup, not just him, but the other two guys. They've got this whole crew of people ready to go to the cross that day. They are ready to go. Well, that cross was prepared not for Christ, who was just arrested in the middle of the night before, but that cross was prepared for this man, this rebel, this murderer, this thief, Barabbas. And so we remember, going back to Palm Sunday, that Palm Sunday saw a crowd celebrate Jesus as their king, that Jesus entered into Jerusalem as the king. And if you were here last Sunday when we talked about that Jesus came into Jerusalem not as the king that they were expecting, not as even the king that they wanted. They wanted a king that they could kind of tack onto their life. They wanted the Jesus who would bring them the better life. They wanted Jesus that was, your best life now, Jesus. That's what they wanted. They wanted the Jesus who would bring them political power and clout and maybe wealth and happiness and make everything better in their lives, in the here and now. But the Jesus who rode on that donkey on Palm Sunday was not that Jesus, but rather he was the Jesus who was the true King of Israel. Not the king they were expecting, but the true King of Israel, King of kings and Lord of lords. And he rode into that city to take his place as the true King of Israel. And yet here on Good Friday, we see a man named Barabbas, a man who has been tried. And he was even trying to be the political Messiah that they wanted. This is a man who was wanted for insurrection. He was doing everything that the crowds, when they were saying, "Blessed be the King of Israel," they were hoping for a Barabbas. They wanted a Barabbas. They give us Barabbas. They even cried, "Give us Barabbas," because they would rather have Barabbas than the true King of Israel. Because Barabbas is the type of guy who can be kind of tacked onto your life and you can fit him and do stuff because he's just a regular guy. And he fits what they're looking for. He fits in the box. He checks all the check marks. He's comfortable. He's been fighting against Rome to free them from the empire. He's this guy. That's who he is. He's a guy whom, if they get into too much trouble, he's not going to come against them and say, "Well, let he who is without sin cast the first stone." Because they're just going to pick up stones and stone Barabbas. Because they know exactly who he is. And he knows who he is. He's a rebel, a thief, a murderer. That's who he is. He's controllable. He's understandable. And so here on Good Friday, Pilate calls out to the people and says, "This Jesus of Nazareth, I find no fault in him. I find no fault. And so I'll release him to you. Sure, whatever. I'll just release him to you. You can do what you want. I don't care. I find no fault in him." He washes his hands of this sick madness that the people have got going on. And he washes his hands. This man has done nothing wrong. This man, Barabbas, is a murderer and a thief and all these things. This is a political sham. I'll just let him go to you. No big deal. But again, we see the people there cry out, much to the shock of Pilate's ears, and no doubt the person who was most shocked of anybody that day was Barabbas. Because it was on that day that Barabbas heard a whole crowd of people say, "We want Barabbas." And I can almost guarantee you that never in his whole life had he ever heard a crowd say, "We want Barabbas." Because never in his whole life had a whole crowd said, "We want a murderous thief." But that day on Good Friday, that's exactly what Barabbas heard. He heard the people shun the righteous one to choose a sinner. They wanted Barabbas. They didn't want that king that God had given them. They wanted the one that they could understand, they could grasp. They wanted that one who at least had some promise of a better life here and now. But that true king that came, much to Barabbas' shock, much to that crowd's shock, he didn't come to give them a more comfortable life. He didn't come to do any of the things that they expected, but he came to die. He came so that on that very day, at that very moment, that Pilate could stand there with Barabbas on one side and Jesus the Christ on the other and say to the people, "Whom will you have?" And so that the people would choose him. He was there so that they could choose him that day, so that he would die that day. He came to die. He came to die for their sins. And that death calls us to see ourselves as who we are. That's why it's uncomfortable. That's why we don't like to talk to our neighbors about the gospel. Because to talk to our neighbors about the gospel calls us and confronts us to say to our neighbors, "You're a really swell guy, but you're a sinner." It calls us to look at our neighbors and say to them, "I am Barabbas, and so are you." But just like Barabbas that day, it doesn't end on a cross. Because with Jesus in the equation, the rebel Barabbas doesn't have to die. Because with Jesus stepping into the equation, now the one who is deserving of that cross, the one who earned that cross, now gets to go free and skip along the road giving all those high fives on the way out of town. I am Barabbas. I am a rebel. I have rebelled against the righteous one. I am Barabbas. I am a murderer. I've never murdered anybody with my hands. But Jesus' own words say that if we thought an angry thought against our brothers, that we've committed murder in our hearts. I am Barabbas. I am a thief. Yeah, I've stolen a pen from the bank. I mean, come on, who hasn't stolen the pen from the bank? I am Barabbas. And in saying and confronting that I am Barabbas, I can have the forgiveness of Christ. And so Good Friday calls us all to say, I am Barabbas. We are Barabbas. Because Jesus died for one man that Good Friday. The man who will stand up and say, I am Barabbas. That is for whom, the one for whom Christ died. That's why we celebrate. That's why Good Friday is the center point of everything, because it is in Good Friday, and it is in this cross, that the one who can come to God and say, I am Barabbas, the thief, the murderer, the fill in the blank, I am the wretch. Save me by your amazing grace. And it is because of Good Friday that God can say, yeah, I took care of Barabbas. I sent my son to die in his stead, so that instead of Barabbas dying on that cross, Christ would die on that cross for him. And so that's Good Friday. That's what it's all about. It's all about me, because I am Barabbas. And it's all about me being Barabbas because it's not about me ultimately. It's all about me because it's not about me. Because it's about the one who died on the cross. That's what makes Easter so amazing. As we go into Easter, without this, that means nothing. Conversely, without that, that means this nothing. So Good Friday calls us all to say together, I am Barabbas. And so if you would